The Lawrence County Community Y Salute to Courage program is proud to honor Fred Rentz.
What is courage? You can look at it in many different ways.
Mental or moral strength to venture, persevere, and withstand danger, fear, or difficulty.
As the boys were storming the beach in Normandy, Fred was giving them cover.
When I think of Fred, I think of a selfless mentor, a selfless community servant.
Fred is someone that I would call a role model.
Courage, in my view, is being willing and determined to do the right thing no matter who it upsets.
You know, there are three kinds of leaders. Those who make things happen, those who wish for things to happen, and those who wonder what happened.
I think every city needs a Fred Rentz.
Fred is a person who makes things happen.
To go back about 20 years before my first wife died, she was in St. Francis Hospital, and Dr. Kim was a neurologist his offices were here in this hospital. He would take me while I was down there visiting her and run neurology tests on my legs primarily, and found that I had peripheral neuropathy, which is a disease of the nerves, which they really don't have a cure for. My mother had told me in polite society, you never speak about religion or politics. And I think that trying to describe my life without reference to God is like trying to describe an automobile without describing the engine, because it's God, the engine, who makes my life work.
I think Fred Rentz meets and exceeds the definition of both humanity and courage.
Fred's great-grandfather, John Rentz, came to the U.S. from Bremen, Germany in the mid-1800s. He and his wife lived on a farm in the Croton area of Newcastle. Fred Rentz was born in 1924 and raised alongside his elder brother Dick, 8 years his senior. After graduating from Newcastle High School, Fred enrolled in Oberlin College to become an attorney, but after just one semester, he left to answer his country's call. At just 18 years of age, like many of his time, Fred joined the U.S. Army Air Corps during World War II. He trained to fly the B-24 Liberator bomber. With each mission, his life was on the line, constantly facing deadly anti-aircraft fire.
They all had flak jackets. Everyone had a jacket that they used. And anyone who had a seat, pilot, co-pilot, bombardier, all took the flak jackets off and sat on them because all the flak came from the ground up, and they were most concerned about what was happening to their lower extremities.
Fred flew and completed 30 missions, including one on D-Day.
You look at that generation of the World War II, you know, the greatest generation. For damn sure they were and are the greatest generation. I can obviously tell you, my father, a World War II veteran in Okinawa, is the one man I respect the most in this world. Number two is Fred Rentz.
I had a number of blessings in my life. One of which, the first thing I think of, is the fact that I did not receive a Purple Heart, which would have meant I was wounded. And it's a blessing I was not wounded during my 30 missions.
For his service, he received the Distinguished Flying Cross, 4 Air Medals, and the European Theater Ribbon. On June 25, 1944, after completing his tour of duty at the ripe old age of 20, he returned home and married his childhood sweetheart, Suzanne Shannon. The wedding was held in her parents' living room. They honeymooned in Cleveland, Ohio. Together they had 2 children, Bruce Rentz and Nancy Rentz. Nancy married Charles Blakely and has 2 children, Caroline and Ann Shannon Blakely, who died when she was just 23 years old. Fred furthered his education, receiving a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from Carnegie Tech, today known as Carnegie Mellon. He and Suzanne moved to California, where he earned a master's degree in electrical engineering from Caltech. He worked for North American Aviation for about 5 years.
When Fred's health started failing, I admired the way that he and Barb just took off to travel wherever. It didn't matter what the disability was, they were going to overcome it.
On Christmas night, 1988, Suzanne suffered a stroke.
She didn't speak for 18 months. And after Fred and I were married, I met one of the nurses that he had taking care of her. And that nurse said, and Susie couldn't speak, that nurse said to me, "I learned more from Susie Rentz than any person I've ever known." So that speaks to the kind of lady she was.
And as the Lord wished it, he met another gal, a wonderful gal named Barbara.
And most importantly, I'm sure for Fred, is he met his beloved Barbara at the Human Services Center while she was under our employ. And I've told Fred this many times, he owes us because of Barbara. He owes us big time.
He and his brother, Dick, that was their lifetime hobby of restoring antique cars or getting a neat, unique car.
According to Fred, the Rentz family might never have become involved in the Newcastle News if not for sauerkraut. George Treadwell, a local attorney, was owner of the Newcastle News. It seems that an editor on his staff loved sauerkraut. He went to the Rentz farm and asked Fred's great-grandmother if she would sell him some. She agreed, then asked if he could find a job for her little Freddie. With that, Fred's grandfather began the Rentz family tradition at the Newcastle News. In 1954, he took over the production of the Newcastle News with his brother. Another of Fred's many blessings was to leave California and come back to Newcastle to run the paper. Interestingly, George Treadwell's granddaughter, Louise, married actor Spencer Tracy after meeting him in New York City. Dick became president of the Newcastle News after the death of his father.
Fred and Dick were so totally different.
Fred has always been very independent. Almost to a fault. Fred was the student. My father was not. He was the socialite.
Well, Fred and Dick both wanted to be called by their first names. They preferred not to be called Mr. Even though they ran the organization, they were in charge, they wanted to treat everybody fairly, on an equal basis.
Seen by news employees as a caring man, not just an employer, Fred remained there until his retirement in 1988 when the paper was sold.
He knew everybody who worked for him. At that time, probably 100 people were better. And he knew everyone's first name, last name. He knew your wife. He knew your children.
Well, I think they created a company loyalty here. And that's the reason why we have so many people on our staff who have been there for so many years.
He was diagnosed with an incurable debilitating neuromuscular disease in 1992, which over the years has robbed his ability to perform the routine tasks that most of us take for granted. He is unable to eat meals as one normally does. He has not had solid food for more than 1 year.
I have to say it's not just Fred by himself. The support of his very courageous wife, Barb, it's just been fantastic.
I've got no physical pain. You can imagine the mental pain is significant. I get frustrated because I can't really do anything for myself.
It's not easy on Barb either, because Barb's the caregiver, and it seems like the caregiver is the one that always takes the brunt and has to do all the running. And again, that's someone you never hear complain.